I'm really excited for this next interview. So this is Deborah Byrd, and this is my first interview with somebody that I haven't known for a very long time, and I don't hang out with super, a lot. I most of my interviews are calling up friends that I know that have been through things and bringing them in and talking to them. But you, in my world, I feel like you're newer on the scene. You haven't been like a staple of the mortgage industry, like Bill Hart or who did I
Mhm.
interview that have been 50 years in the mortgage business. There's people who've been doing this a long time. When did you get in? Like, let's start kind of mortgage based and then go
Yeah.
from there. When did you join the industry?
So funny story. So most people know me as Denise Donahue, or the Mortgage Nerd's twin sister. And for a long time, people thought we were the same person. Like they would either see me on Mortgage Coach or one of us would be at Sales Mastery presenting. And they always just thought we were the same person, which used to be really cool when you were younger. We could use that for
Oh
our
yeah.
advantage. But I was a middle school science teacher and girls athletic coach. I've always been passionate about education and really finding the classrooms of all the kids that none of the other teachers wanted. So, like you and Savage, when you guys talk about being ADHD or even the way
Mhm.
that you guys present information, I relate to really well. But I was expecting my third child. And at the time, Denise was like, because me and my husband were both teachers and coaches. So affording three kids was not easy on teacher salary, especially when they were all like a year apart. So she was like, "Do you realize you send me more closed deals than my top real estate agents, like each month and every year?" And I just was like, "Well, I'm a natural connector. I'm always looking for who has a problem. Oh, I got this person that can solve it." And she's like, "Well, I know you need to make more money. Have you ever thought about getting into the mortgage space?" And I was like, "Hell no." My first degree was nursing. I wanted to be the Patch Adams of the hospital. Second degree education, like I'm a servant, consulting, teacher mindset. And she's like, "Well, that's all that I do. I mean, I don't consider myself a salesperson." And so not for the best motives, but I was like, "You know what? I do need to make more money, and I don't know how we're gonna do this. I mean, we can barely afford, the clothes and the milk for our kids. There's gotta be another way." And so my first week, after I got licensed, we went to Todd Duncan's Sales Mastery, and I really am fortunate that I can say I didn't grow up like from the countrywide days or from a big box bank. Not that there's anything wrong with big box banks, but
Mhm. Mhm.
when Denise pulled me in, and that's really the only reason why I probably got the job is because of her credibility, and that was 2013. Is it was like I had the hardest coach, which was her. She was relentless. She wasn't gonna sugarcoat anything, and she taught and bred me to, it's you eat what you kill, and you have to provide exceptional service to be able to stand out. It was a lot about branding and marketing, and so I got to spend time, after Sales Mastery, went to Academy, you get that 3.5 pound binder, and she's like, "Your job is to implement and execute." And so I would go meet with the agents or go get on the phones and tee up appointments for her, and I almost didn't know what I didn't know, so it was easy. I mean, I really felt convicted that she was the best mortgage professional in the area, so, like, I would make calls with no problem. And then I started to learn how to develop the business and helped with, recruiting and CRMs and meeting with financial advisors, divorce attorneys, and really just more of the, again, natural connecting and business building side that I've just always loved to do. But I did not love analyzing tax returns or being stuck behind a desk where I was like, I just don't feel like I'm utilizing my gift if I'm kneecap to kneecap with people. And I felt selfish admitting that, like, I hid it for a long time because I made a lot of money in mortgage, but it wasn't setting my soul on fire, so I just felt a
Mhm.
little empty with it, and I felt guilty that here I was used to teaching with large audiences and, like, really changing the trajectory of a lot of kids' lives in that funky middle school age group, that I thought I could do that in the mortgage space with teaching credit and income and wealth, but it wasn't making the impact that I felt like I needed or could make. And so I kind of went up the chain and ended up being the CMO and, did that for some time and thought being stuck at a company where you have one team name on the front of the jersey, you can only help those originators. And we were trying to force them to do social media, like, "Here's the graphics, like, we'll do it for you." They didn't value it and didn't understand how it could be truly a tool and not just a toy that, really uses them. So 2018 is when I officially left originating. Now, I still always do my continuing education because I feel like I worked so hard to get my license that I'm like, I don't ever want it. I don't think I would ever use it, but my goodness, it was hard for me to get it. I'm not a great test taker, so I'm going to do my continuing ed every year and keep it, but I don't practice anymore. I now run a social media marketing company that is designed just for originators, and I don't work with any other industry, and I have different tools that we can sell that helps with automating their scheduling and optimizing AI, and even integrates with Chat GPT, as that's like a new buzzword.
Nice.
But I really feel like I'm just creating lesson plans that's about financial literacy that is now going through the vessels of these amazing originators, to connect the families who need great financial advice to the loan officers who actually care to give it to them. So in a nutshell, it's been since 2013, Ken.
That is
That was a
such a
long
cool
answer.
path. Well, no, that
Yeah,
path is awesome because you know what you love to do, you know what you're best gifted at. You can be successful at other things, but it's not just for you. It wasn't satisfying to just be successful at something that wasn't feeding your heart. And
which that was
you kind of
painful.
went back to teaching.
I did. I mean, and having that internal dilemma, which, we were raised by my dad from 6 months old and on. My mom has schizophrenia and bipolar. So I
Mm.
literally was going to different psych wards and mental institutions as a child, like visiting her, which is when I fell in love with the human soul, like of all colors and walks, and just studying human behavior. But he taught us at a young age, and that you don't really ask for help. You don't show if you need help. Like,
Mm.
he only gave love when we achieved. Like, he wasn't one of those that would kiss you goodnight or say, I love you. It was like when we made him look good through sports or school, it's like you would finally get the nod. So we're all these like natural high achievers in my family, like constantly seeking to get that I'm proud of you. And so it was hard to take that shift. And one, I went to school to be a teacher, like that was my identity. And now I'm going into a space where it's like commission only. And even though I had my sister to lean on, I still was like scared to death and almost felt
Mm.
like, what did I do all of this for? Like, now I have to do this because I have to raise a family. So a little resentment in the beginning, and then also just fear of like, I don't even know how to spell mortgage, let alone pre-approved. And like, I had people in the community that trusted me, and they would like give me their loans. And I mean, Denise had to do a lot of cleanup. I'd forget to include MI. And I was like, shit, it's only 5% down
Mhm.
conventional. I forgot to throw that in there. But living a lie, I call it a hollow victory. It's like, deep down, it's not what you feel meant to do. And you can only sustain that for so long until you finally get to like a point where it's okay, could it be possible to actually do the things that I love to do with the people I love to do it with, and also what I'm passionate about? And so I just finally decided to burn the boats. And, it was more of a secret. I was doing it for Denise for some time, and she would always be the one interviewed for being the loan officer with great marketing. And I've always been a great backup dancer. Like, I'm one of those. It's
Mhm.
funny when you say I'm newer. It's a lot of times I'm behind the scenes.
Mhm.
But it was a struggle. I mean, it was a struggle. I mean, I definitely had some
Mhm.
dark days and, like, didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, and felt like a fraud where, I was like, "I just can't keep doing this." So,
Were
finally
there
had the
thoughts of like, why did I leave teaching? Like, have you looked back at that and said, what would have happened
well,
if I would have taken that different path or stayed
no,
on
because
that path?
I think I was also at the point where I was done with the education system. I mean,
Mhm.
I had moved from I got out of coaching girls athletics to then being an instructional coach. So I would go around and help teachers be better teachers.
Mhm.
You gotta remember, I always looked at it from the lens of the kids who struggled, because I was a kid who struggled in school. It was
Mhm.
not easy for me. And so I always root for them. And, you get certain labels as a child, or, certain groups would get more tutorials because they count more for test scores. And so as I moved up the chain in curriculum, I was like, we couldn't even have tutorials before school with kids without like this written reason. And I'm like, dude, I would have never
Oh.
made it through school without relationships of my teachers and coaches.
Mhm.
And so, as I was kind of seeing more behind the scenes, I was like, I don't even know if I believe in what we're doing anymore with education. I mean, we're putting them all in like robots, and like it's a factory, and we're not even teaching them how to learn. It's more just like a bunch of arms and legs out there. So I was kind of also at that point where I knew something needed to change there because I was starting to see the ugly side of what was going on. And then I can't imagine with COVID. I mean, my husband had
Oh
gotten out.
gosh.
I mean, like,
Yeah.
he finally left teaching. It was right after COVID. He actually works with my sister now. And I'm like, there's no way. I don't know if I would have been able to survive that.
Yeah. Okay. So the question I ask everybody before they come on, and we didn't talk very much before we started, but the question I ask everybody is what's off limits? You said nothing is off limits. So I don't know if you know this, my wife is in mental health. She's a
Oh,
therapist specializing in marriage and ADHD. And so
no,
I
I
don't
did
know
not
how
know
she
that.
picked those two things, but somehow that is where she ended up. But so I know, I know a lot from my relationship with Mindy for as many years. We've been married 27 years. So I know that world a little bit.
Mhm.
I Help me understand how two girls with a mom that dealt with that, a dad that was in that. How do you
Mhm.
both end up like this?
Well, so there's three of us. We have an older sister that's 4 years older. And, I had said this right before we had got on. Denise and I were delivery table surprise twins. So they thought the whole time it was just one baby. And my mom was a little older when she had us. She was 32. So how the doctors explained it to us is that sometimes you can carry I think it's called a phenotype, but a traumatic event would have to ignite that gene to then be proactive and show up
Yeah.
in your life. And so my mom was head of marketing and sales at Xerox. She was a model in New York. She always kind of would beat to her own drum. She was the breadwinner of the family, didn't really want any kids, to be perfectly honest. She admits that. And so when not just one baby came out, but two, they think that could have been what triggered that gene to just, and she was also getting verbally and, physically abused a bit. And he was cheating on her quite often. And she was a preacher's kid. So you're taught as a preacher's kid, divorce is not an option. You stay married.
Mhm.
So she's a very strong, tough woman, brilliant. But the doctors almost didn't even know how to diagnose her because her case was so extreme to the point where I just called that psychiatrist a week ago for something that happened with my family. And he's helped my brother. And so we have a half brother. He's 18 years older, but he had lost his daughter to suicide. And so anyways, this psychiatrist has been around for quite some time. And 30 years ago was when he first diagnosed her. And when I asked him, hey, do you still remember my mom? And he was like, oh, how could I forget? Because, it wasn't as common to be diagnosed with schizophrenia or
Mhm.
bipolar. But I'm so grateful for it because, and I was the only one in the family that kind of kept a relationship with her. I mean, obviously, it was hard. You go to different psych wards and there's a red line and your mom's in a straitjacket. She can't hug you and you don't really know what's going on. It was definitely like the Patch Adams scene of, you see people who they all want the same thing. They just go about it in different ways of the vehicle of fulfilling that. But that's your mom and I'm a girl. So being one for my dad to get full custody of us was not an easy process and took a lot of money spent. It was a 7-year journey, but full custody of three girls 40 years ago was not heard of in Texas. So he fought hard, and I really do think his motive was to protect us and give us a life that he was honestly concerned if she, you know, around or had us full custody, what that could look like. And so as she got out of different places and we would have supervised visitation, that eventually got to be a little bit better. But I did learn that all people have different demons. Some are invisible. You can't see them, and it's unfortunate. And the amount of bullying, or even when we tell people to just be authentic, just be you. It's like someone like my mom, she can't just be her because she's
Mhm.
clinically insane if she were to be. But also the mental health system is just really bad.
Mhm.
It's not great. Again, and now I understand why a lot of homeless shelters are full of mental health, because family end up, you have to have boundaries at some point. And even now to today, so fast forward, the medication that she's been on for so many years has destroyed her organs to where she can't even take
Mhm.
the medicine anymore and it, be processed in her body. So, we've had to put her in and out of different places just in the last couple of years. And I even had to file a mental health warrant because I was like, the medicine's not working. this is like, I'm actually concerned for people. If she were out in the, like, she'll try to drive and she cannot drive. But it's hard because she's an adult and she wants to do what she wants to do. And yet she reasons like a toddler sometimes. So it's,
Mhm.
and she's strong and she's forceful. She's got that New York fight in her where you're like, ooh, it's challenging. So, but it's helped us be who we are. I mean, we are pretty relentless, and we've had a lot of challenges since childhood that most people probably would never expect, but it gives me the confidence and the courage to know that without a doubt I can get through pretty much anything because I've always had to from a young age. It's like if I ever had to bet on myself, I would go all in because I never really had parents to depend on. um our dad lives in the Philippines now. We haven't seen him since we were like 20, but it's like sink or swim. The only option we had was to swim. Like, we didn't have the luxury of taking risk because we had mom or dad as a backup plan to even go live with. Like, my dad lived with me in college. So, um, you know, uh, with all that pain is, to me, a lot of times the very portal of transformation needed to help you know you can overcome anything with the right perspectives. Just sometimes our perspective is not where it could be. So how are we constantly challenging our vantage point to make sure that we're not missing on other possible opportunities or the gifts of the pain?
The gifts of the pain. I love the way you phrase that. But you said something interesting there in that you said we had no choice but to swim. And it's what's interesting is you said before that it was sink or swim, and we had no choice but to swim. Sink or swim is two choices,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
you had a choice. You
Hmm.
chose to swim, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
you did have a choice. What, I mean, do you remember going through it, deciding to swim, or was it was just in you that you're just like, no, like we're not going to let this be? Because a lot of people can let that beat them and into a place where they start repeating things that they've seen growing up, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to get my dad on the podcast at some point. He was the worst childhood that I could ever imagine. I mean, he still sleeps with a bat under his bed because he had to when he was a kid, and that stuff doesn't leave your head, right? But he's
Yeah.
also the best dad I could ever imagine. And so,
Yes.
and I tell him all the time, like, you didn't have to do that. Like, a
Mhm.
lot of people would be like, well, of course I'm like this. Look at my parents. I'm fascinated by people who have every reason to fail, have every reason to embrace that failure, and the world would forgive you
Mhm.
and bring you in and be like, it wasn't your fault, but you didn't. Like, I want to know I honestly want to know why, like why.
It's it's a hard one to answer, and the only thing, I mean, I was very insecure as a kid, and I do podcast and interviews quite a bit, and people will sometimes tell me how I appear so confident, and I'm like, it's such an out of body experience because I look back at the little child in me where I struggled for so many years, and I mean, like, let's just say for the first 35 years of my life of just never feeling like enough, or you know posing a little bit. And so when people say that, I'm like, thank you. I'm going to try to receive that compliment, even though I don't necessarily own it every day yet. But I will say those moments as a kid, I think because I was such a pleaser. I mean, I was the kid that wouldn't even finish tests, like state tests, because I wanted to make sure everybody else had a pencil and like an eraser and everyone else was good. And I was kind of that person with my mom and my dad growing up, but um, I didn't want to disappoint. And I think the fear of disappointing others is why I never gave myself the out to not be better, because I could disappoint myself all day long. And I would beat myself up and like verbally, I'm like, oh, you suck and you're an idiot, blah, blah, blah. But if someone depended on me, like my mom, I knew the nurses had told me like every Saturday, she knew when I would come visit with my crayon sheets, what if I missed a Saturday? I would fear she would take her life because they would tell me like that's her one day that she like knew I would be there. Or even, my siblings and just and teachers and coaches, like we were very athletic. I think my dad bred us to be the boys. He never like legit tried to put us in football in seventh grade. So we were major tomboys, very competitive. Like he would wake us up before school. We would have to make 50 free throws. I mean, he definitely taught us work ethic and that, no one's going to outwork you. So with that success and feeling responsible for a team and being captains of a team and leading, going to playoffs and hopefully state, it was like, if I give myself this out, I'm hurting all these other people. And so that was
Mhm.
that fear of letting them down is what made me get up and just pretend like things were okay. And again, we may not have food at home, but I'm going to go out there and go do cross country and then go do basketball better than anybody else because that's what, you know, the team needs. And so that need to be number one, or that need to be, the leader of the team is what kept me going.
Okay, so how hard do you take it when you do disappoint people? Because that's bound to happen.
Oh, it's, I've learned to get better with it. And I've also learned I can't fix everyone's problems and I'm not supposed to.
Mhm.
That's not my role. And sometimes you have to let others own their mess and that it's okay. You don't have to take it personally. That was through probably my 20s and 30s. The biggest lessons I had to learn was I can't make other people happy. I can't always make other people see in themselves what I see. It's a journey for everybody. And as much as I was learning and I would get excited by some of this personal development stuff, it's like I would immediately become this mini coach. And I'm like, that can push people away. They have to be ready. The student will appear when they're ready. And if I force this, it's not, I could damage the message just because of the messenger. And so, you know, learning to know that I'm not perfect and that that's actually the beauty is the flaws and being okay to speak about the flaws. That's why
Mhm.
I'm kind of more of the open book out of the two of us as far
Mhm.
as twins is I'm like, here's all my shit. Like it's very messy, you know. But it's the reason why I do that is because I can connect with others where they're like, gosh, you make me feel like I belong, or I feel safe enough to tell you this because your shit was so bad that, or you made
Mhm.
X, Y, and Z mistakes that maybe I could tell you mine. And not only will you accept me for who I am, but you may be able to help me. And I don't think that's talked about enough, even in the loan officer space for the sales depression that a lot of people are in right now.
Mhm.
It's a real thing and it's hard I mean, it's a mindset battle big time.
Yeah. The I don't think you can fully I don't think most people will fully get the magnitude of going from it's my job to make sure everybody else is happy and I will be the responsible one and I'll carry you through to to go from that mentality to being okay letting people down because it might not be about you is the largest leap I've had to take personally because I'm the same way. All I want to
Mhm.
do is please everybody and make them happy and make them love me. And if they don't, if I'm in a room with 300 people I'm speaking to and one of them is giving me a mean face, it took forever of speaking. I've been speaking for 20 years and only in the last 3 have I been able to say, maybe that's not about me,
Mhm.
because I would always take that in and be like, that person hates me.
Right.
299 people love me and think I'm the best speaker they've ever seen. That one person hates me and I don't understand why. And what did I do? And there's stuff in other people's
Oh.
heads. They're on their own journey. And
Mhm.
this year I've been speaking a lot and getting a lot more serious in speaking because I'm normally just funny and have fun.
Uh-huh.
And then I usually get serious at the end of the seminar and kind of drive points home. And I've been talking about some very difficult things at the end of class this year of just what we're going through and what the industry is going through, what I'm going through, and getting more deep. And when I first did it, I'm like, oh my gosh, they all hate me because nobody was smiling. And then I went, oh, it's hitting. Because I would start
Yeah.
getting reviews back or somebody would walk up afterwards and be like, this just happened 2 weeks ago. Guy walks up after my class. He goes, the last 3 minutes changed my life. And I'm like,
Wow.
thought you hated me. But I'm starting to get it where it's like, okay, them
Mhm.
being contemplative has literally nothing to do with me being not enough for them. And
Right.
so you had to be enough for everybody to come around to where you're okay if you're not what they needed is just it's a giant leap that a lot of people take a lot of therapy to get to that
Yeah.
point.
Well, and I
So,
think too, if you can't pour from an empty cup, so I think I would give and give and give and give. And then if I had
mhm,
like one negative feedback, like kind of to your point, it was like, I wasn't allowing myself to also fill my own cup. So I would catch myself. I've always been known with a lot of energy and I can go anywhere. And it's like, oh, I'm a little butterfly going around and love getting to know people. But then it's like I go back to my room and I have to like refuel and sit in a bathtub or eat my sweet tarts or my Oreos, which everyone knows I love. And I have to like reinvest in myself and make sure that I'm not dependent on those external factors, but that I can, recharge my battery, so to speak, so that I can continue to do that where I don't grow resentment or feel not enough or did that hit well. Um, that's probably been the last, I'd say 5 years of, learning to love myself just as much as I love others and, allow that to be the message sometimes. So I
Mhm.
am looking to get more speaking gigs. So if you ever can't do any or people who need a female speaker, you be sure to throw my name in the hat if you would.
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, that for me, that's life. Speaking like, do you watch Ted Lasso?
Yes.
When
Uh-huh.
Danny says football is life, to me, speaking
Yeah.
is life. Like I could be on stage all day, every day and never get tired of that. And then, like
Mhm.
you said, the Bath and Oreos, for me, it's airplanes and Sour Patch Kids. So if I get on an airplane where nobody can reach me, like I rarely activate text.
Yeah.
Like you can do that now on planes. I never get the internet and I rarely activate text because I like, as much as we're out there in public and like
Yes.
being everything they expect us to be, we need to
Mhm.
be then back finding ways to, get back to ourselves. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you have talked to Dave Savage about this, but Savage and I, when I stayed at his house for 3 nights, he got a, wonder if I have it with me. I'm going to show
We
you this.
did a mortgage coach interview when you were there and y'all were talking
Oh
about this
yeah,
acupuncture thing. And I'm like, oh, that's it.
that's it.
That's
It's
it.
the
Yeah.
acupressure mat. For those of
Yeah.
you listening on audio, you got to go get the video because this is the one Dave has. I didn't opt for this one when I was with him. His wife would walk in the room and we're both shirtless, laying on our
Oh
backs
my,
on these mats with a meditation running, and she's like, "I don't even want to ask." But yeah, it's
that's
finding those
hilarious.
types of things.
Yeah.
So you have to give yourself that time. What are
Yeah.
your things that bring you back or that help you center?
So I love reading books and usually business or
Mhm.
marketing or strategy type books. I also love just scrolling on TikTok in my bathtub and laughing and watching humans kind of act like kids and be creative again, where it's not all this super polished talking heads.
Mhm.
I have 4 children and they keep me very busy. So sometimes just being a kid even with them. And I always joke, people are like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I'm like, I hope I never grow up. I actually like having the 12-year-old boy humor, which I do have. Most who are close to me know that about me. But honestly, it's just sometimes it's just alone time and it's either learning something because I feel like when I learn, I'm progressing. And the more I learn, the more
Mhm.
I can serve. I don't always know who I could be serving, but I know if I stopped learning, I would be very demotivated and I would probably get depressed. So I have to feel like I'm progressing in some way. Which then also helps with what we do. Because when we help loan officers create social media, they think and we tell people we create media that transforms lives. Like in theory, if enough eyeballs could see these financial literacy lessons that we create, we may be able to change the way Americans get into debt. But what they don't realize is the first life that it actually changes is their own because they have to value their own opinion more than other people's approval to put themselves out there and actually
Mhm.
do video. Or it's a little bit of accountability for them to actually know their craft well enough to have something to say. And so the first person, they don't realize this because it's more once we get in to work with them, but it's watching them blossom as the human and feeling more confident and learning because now they know they have to learn something and we spoon feed them with a couple of different things, but they become better people. And that is what is the most fueling of what we get to do is it's really like personal development through the lens of social media, but also helping them be better professionals, which ultimately helps, Americans and their family and themselves and financially. And so the impact of that is just massive.
Mhm. And I love that. And I love that you're doing that because it's so cool when you see somebody who's got a unique special gift at doing something and they find their way to that. And then the passion is, I want to change the world.
Yeah.
And that's the part I mentioned to somebody recently that I still take full responsibility for the crash of
Mm.
'08 because I was teaching starting in '03 and I wasn't able to teach enough people fast enough to get them to change the way they behave so that we could save the mortgage industry. But like I put that on my shoulders. I know it's not, but like the same time, like my drive is to do that. And the fact that your drive is really to make the world a better place is just awesome.
Yeah.
And And what's also funny is you're doing that by working with people saying, let's get you out there. And I imagine you're not like, let's get the right pumpkin pie recipe around
You
Thanksgiving
know?
that you can post. Because that stuff, I see it and I'm like, if I get one more
Listen,
email from people on 4th of July, that's
yes,
like the same email everybody else just sent me. Like,
yes,
I know you bought a template. Like, I know that
right,
that's because I'm
yeah,
seeing it from all the people. Like, how
right.
about you be smart? That'd be cool too. But
Well,
you're
that's
doing
my
that, right?
biggest pet peeve is like, and I could make a lot more money if we just had one piece of content that we gave to all originators across the country.
Right.
But we create so many different, like, quote, content threads or lesson plans per area, per zip code, per county, so that there is no loan officer posting the same thing on the same day with the same caption. As that always mattered to me. And that could be, subconsciously going back to being an identical twin where the society always wants to find your similarities. And I even tell my clients, I'm like, listen, don't tell me that you don't know how to differentiate when I had an identical twin, we shared the same DNA, we're from the same womb, we worked for the same company, sold the same product. She had 10 years on me in the business and was like a minor celebrity in the space. I was thinking, why would anyone want to use me? Like I had to figure out my X factor. What made me different when I had an identical twin out there. So I'm like, a lot of you can't tell me that you have that exact same scenario where if I could figure that out, like trust me, you can figure this out too. But you have to get
Mhm.
comfortable with, when you do put yourself out there, you get some hate. And sometimes the comments are opportunities to learn because there's times where
Mhm.
I've posted things and I'm like, okay, this is true. I didn't think of it at this angle. And so putting yourself out there gives you opportunities for that feedback, but it also allows us to address the vanity metrics and the concern of being compared with others. And I'm like, listen, anyone who has 100,000 followers who only talks about mortgage, like I can show you that shit ain't real. I have software we can run to tell us how many of those followers were bought, how many of the likes and comments are consistently being bought. So like it goes back to what's your true motive of being on social. Is your
Mhm.
motive just to appear famous? Because followers don't mean revenue, you know? And
Mhm.
why do you need a lot of people in other countries who don't speak your language and don't even have profile pics? Like that shouldn't determine what makes you feel like it's a success. Because even if it's just one person that saw that post, maybe it's talking about debt consolidation right now, where here's exactly why you would trade in your 3% interest rate for 6.5. And you actually educate them on the cash flow because we know people have insane amount of credit card debt right now. That's like the very lifeline for some families, right? Like right now,
Mhm.
today's opportunity, you could literally be that lifeline for somebody if you cared enough to maybe do an encompass sort of who of my clients had credit card debt that even though they have a low rate, they could benefit from just a conversation and just go be that local superhero for them.
Mhm. Yeah, it blows my mind that we're not going back and strategizing stuff like that. Like it's the fight, flight, or freeze. I didn't know freeze was the thing. I learned it last year, but it's always fight or flight. But the freeze is so real for a lot of loan officers. Where they're like, I just don't know, and it's like, well, what have
Yeah.
you tried? Well, what? Like, what have you
Yeah.
tried? I I mean, what I did last year. It's like, oh, when
Right.
rates were 2, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So that's not working. That's strange. Like, what else should
Yeah.
we be doing? Where do you
Or the
find the
waiting.
line? The what?
Like the waiting. I had
Oh
my
yeah.
clients, I told it was like 2 months ago. I was like, what if inventory doesn't get better and rates don't come down? Like, let's just say, what if that never happens? What is your plan? Like, shouldn't we be working on that plan for just what if?
Mhm.
That way you're not just like frozen and not doing anything because you're just waiting for rates to come down, or waiting
We
for
call that the
inventory.
May 10th strategy.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know the whole May 10th thing, but there was the word on the street was May 10th, all the rates would go down. And I think a lot
Yeah.
of people were
Because
like, just hang in there, we're good, we're good, we're good.
yeah.
And then it wasn't based on reality necessarily, and it shifted the other way. So yeah, you can't. I love that. What if everything doesn't get better? Like we used to
Yeah.
factor in automatic growth in our budgets. Like, of course we're going to
Mm.
grow. We've grown every year for years. And so the assumption is we grow. And we have to kill that assumption and go, okay, what if we get no more business? Do the budget on that. And then
Right.
manage the company that way. And then all the net becomes what we make as margin for the company. But like do it based on what if things suck. And
Right.
I think that's new for a lot of people in the mortgage industry to look at. Like, that and figuring out you have to make a profit is, for a lot of branches, they're like, what do you mean? I've never made a profit. You've never had a problem with me. And it's like, yeah, well, it's never been
Yeah.
this tight.
Right.
So
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, there's a lot out there who are bleeding right now. And, I feel for them. I know some of them are doing all the right things, what feels like all the right things, but maybe it just hasn't been done long enough yet where it's not going to be the instant gratification, or there is some repositioning that you may have to do that if done consistently, it will pay off. But it's that, I know people talk about the sales shape. I think it's a sales depression and sometimes a mindset issue that one of your guests that you had on, the lawyer who said that when he goes and speaks, like he's thinking of all the possible questions. That was your last one that you just did, right?
yeah,
With
yeah,
Steve.
Steve Richmond.
I'm the one, like when I would take tests, it's like I could justify every answer. I'm like, well, that one could be right in this scenario. Like my objective reasoning is so high where I'm looking at everything from like multiple different angles. I had to learn, no, you're supposed to pick the answer that's most correct most of the time. And I'm like, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they could technically all be right and
Oh
I
my
could
gosh.
create the story in my head of how that scenario could be. So that it can sometimes be exhausting, but it's also a good thing because I'm always thinking of all these other possible scenarios or maybe markets to serve or opportunities that may be disguised as challenges right now. And that's just something that I've done since a child. I mean, it's easy for
Mm-hmm.
me.
I was just going to say, going back to your childhood, like you've never been able to sit back and see what happens. You've always had to be
Yes.
active in making a way for yourself and for your family. So those habits are created at a very early age. And like I said, you didn't have to, but you
Right.
figured out I'm gonna have to, fight for what I want in this world.
Yes. That's why I'm
How old are
so
the
grateful.
kids?
My kids are 13, 12, 11, 9.
Oh my
And I was
gosh.
told I would never be able to have children. They said it would.
Oh
So
my
before I
gosh.
got married, I had told my husband, I'm like, so I know you want a large family. Just so you know, I was told I will most likely never be able to conceive. They did all these testings and it's not looking good. But the good news is I have an identical twin. Maybe we can rent her uterus. Like, don't get any crazy thoughts. You're not sleeping with my sister. But I was like, she doesn't know this yet, but maybe. And so ironically, we had gotten married and it was like 2 months later, I was like, gosh, I feel kind of sick. And I'm one that's like an energizer bunny. I'm go, 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 go. At the time I'm teaching and coaching. And I was like, I actually like feel tired. And that's not like me. And so, my husband was like, why don't you just go to the doctor? And we were also raised, you never go to the doctor. I mean, unless you're like
All right.
something's bleeding or broken, you don't go to the doctor. So I'm like, no, I'm sure it'll
That's
be
such a
fine.
guy thing too. So yeah,
We are such dudes in a lot of ways.
that's so funny.
So I eventually go to the doctor and I get a phone call and she's like, congratulations, your blood work came back positive. And all because I taught science. So I'm like, blood work positive. Like, what are you talking about? And she was like, you're 9 weeks pregnant. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? Like I was about to start my master's in child psychology. And I'm like, we can't even have a dog because he's coaching football. I'm doing volleyball. I'm like, I don't know how we're going to have a kid. And all I said is it better not be a girl. And it was a girl.
Oh my
And then
gosh.
thankfully I have 3 boys after that, which, so their names are Briley, Boss, Champ, and Legend. Those are their real names on their birth certificate. It's a whole nother story. But when you both teach and you have like shithead Johnny, you can't name your kid Johnny because then you're going to think of shithead Johnny. So we
Oh
went
my
with Boss,
gosh.
Champ. And like once we had Boss and Champ, and then we found out we were pregnant again, I'm like, what do we name the third boy when his brothers are Boss and Champ? Like you can't go with.
Legend.
So I literally have shirts that say I gave birth to a legend, and it's true.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And they
You've got
just
to
kind of
call.
own their names.
Yeah,
They like,
that's amazing.
I'm a boss, I'm a champ. And, when I was teaching, I used to tell my students that boss's middle name was man. And they were like, boss man. And
Boss
champ's middle
man.
name was Ian for champ Ian. That's not true or real, but we joke with people and say that. So,
That's so awesome. I could spend like
yeah.
3 hours with you, but we both have
Yeah.
meetings in 5 minutes. So I'm gonna let you
Yes.
go. But this was super awesome. And I do want to bring you back later and get, deeper into a lot of these things because this has been really valuable. I'm like I said, I haven't known you for very long, but I am incredibly impressed in what you've been able to battle. And you're a great example for everybody that's listening to this. I'm excited for people to hear it because they need to hear that story of like, you have two choices. You chose the right one and you've been working your
Mhm.
butt off ever since then. So Appreciate you in the industry, and I look forward to hanging out with you more.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Deborah.